Since Golden Wind has ended and it's one of my favorite parts of the Jojo franchise, I got to see Giorno's character in action. It took me rereading part 4 and watching the anime to finally understand his character, and to understand finally that Giorno is probably the most thematically correct Jojo character and shonen protagonist there is right now. When you read part 4, it's pretty black and white in terms of plot. Giorno wants to become the boss of Passione. Am I even saying that right? I gotta check. Let me see if I'm saying that right. Alright. I think I got something. Okay. Yeah, it's just passion in Italian. But all that aside, the plot is pretty black and white, and in order for him to achieve that goal, he needs to take out the current boss, that being Diavolo, and I forgot to put a fucking disclaimer in this video. But anyway, again, it's pretty much the most shonen plot you'll get. The MC wants to be number 1, so he has to take out the current number 1. So of course we see Giorno's goal to be pretty simple to understand, and it doesn't take brain science to understand. It's neither the plot nor the intricate stands in this current part. I'm talking about how Giorno is probably the most theoretically and thematically correct Jojo character and shonen protagonist there is. What I mean by thematically correct is that Giorno is the theme of the subject of part 5. The theme of part 5 being to find the phone. The theme of part 5 being to find truth. Fuck, man, I'm running into so many damn hurdles today, like shit. But Giorno does fit this theme down to a T. Giorno needs to find the truth behind not only the boss's identity, but various other stand abilities he comes across every time he fights. This theme is repeated consistently throughout Jojo, but it hits really different in part 5, and it fails to pique my interest every time I watch it. Another thing, you may look at me and say, damn, the theme of part 5 is finding truth. Well, that's what I took from it, and I don't want it to sound like, oh, it's trying to find truth like Persona 4 or anything, but it's the subject matter I see in part 5 that makes me think, oh man, it's finding truth. But what I mean by finding truth is that Giorno is always finding out in something in part 5 one way or another. Hell, even as a child, Giorno was able to find out and tell that the men looking for his idol were dangerous to both Giorno and his idol. Later on, Giorno managed to find out that his life managed to improve because his idol improved his life. With all this being said, Giorno had to decide with this information and determination that he would become a gangstar in order to get drugs off of the street for kids to fuck it. You get what I'm saying here. He carves his own path to find the root of all the issues, the truth in Italy. Giorno has a heart of gold just like the other Jojos do, but Giorno's heart of gold is more amplified, if you get what I'm saying. Giorno doesn't like when someone brings innocent people into death-risking affairs. We see this with Polpo when Giorno discovered that Polpo was willing to sacrifice an old man in order to have Giorno join the gang for his entrance exam. When Giorno found out the darkness and evilness in Polpo's heart, he decided to absolve him of his sins by taking his life. Compared to the other Jojos, I've noticed that Giorno has a pretty high body count of about 4 if I count right. Even though the number 4 is a symbol of bad luck in Japan, it's a pretty high number in Jojo. We don't really see our main Jojos take a lot of lives from any other characters in Jojo, but we do see them beat them to a bloody pulp without a second thought. Giorno brings death to those who commit horrible acts and believe they don't need to be forgiven, just like in Cioccolata's case, him being able to enjoy making snuff films and him being a 33-year-old man who used to be a surgeon, if I recall, but they were considered cover-ups. In his case, well, as stated by Diavolo. It's basic knowledge that a common mistake can be forgiven while an outright choice cannot be forgiven. Giorno makes sure not to commonly blur this line and cloud his judgment, where every enemy he faces he's killed off without a blink of an eye or even caring at the very least. I noticed he'll also kill someone who gets in front of his goal to become a gangstar, just like with Ghiaccio for example. He was a major hurdle for Giorno in his path, but Giorno easily got over that by impaling him on a metal spike and posed a major threat for him and Mista at the time. So we can see that Giorno kills for 2 reasons. 1, if they get in his way, or 2, if they commit horrible acts to innocent people who have nothing to do with the conflict at hand. I'm sure Rocky wanted there to be a much more deeper meaning to Giorno's character and wanted him to be extremely multi-layered. To the untrained eye, Giorno would just seem like a criminal, but because it's his occupation. But I have about 2 characters I can compare him to that he's actually related to. I can see a lot of Jonathan and a lot of Dio in John Giorno's fucking so many J's and D's and fuck. Like I said earlier, Giorno is a very compassionate character who has a heart of gold like Josuke and Jonathan. The reason I say this is because how he operates. Jonathan, on one hand, like I said in a previous video, is the most accurate representation and a really good example of what a shonen protagonist should be, where Giorno fuels that statement. Giorno's heart and will are solely from Jonathan and nothing from pure gold. When I look at Giorno's characterization in part 5, I only see Jonathan, and it's almost heartwarming to see this, because we didn't really get to see too much of Jonathan, whereas Araki believed that we got to see maybe the perfect amount of Jonathan in the manga, whereas in the anime, we really only got to see Jonathan for a short time. And to go on ahead and clear this out of the way, Jonathan is one of my favorite JoJos. Fuck you. I like Permanent Purple, fucking Hermit Purple, Purple Hermit. Don't care. It's one of my favorite stands. Please, lynch me. Jonathan lives and fights purely for justice by protecting the weak and fighting purely for the good of humanity. Hell, Araki even said he specifically stated that he wrote Jonathan to be the complete opposite of Dio, that being the light versus the dark, pure evil versus pure good. But Giorno is both the light and the darkness of his fathers. Giorno fights with the seemingly evil for the sake of the light, the evil being the feared gang by the name of Passione, fighting for the light of Italy. He doesn't have a personality traits of Jonathan, but he does have his heart. But the thing is that he's so seemingly close to Dio that it's almost scary. You can argue with me as much as you want. I believe Jojo is more like Dio when it comes down to chasing his ideals and his dreams. Giorno was willing to remove any hurdle in his way to get to his goal and willing to use any means necessary to do so. As we've seen with Dio, he ditched his humanity in order to ascertain the peak of hierarchy. Giorno, on the other hand, sacrificed his seemingly normal Italian high schooler life in order to achieve peace in Italy, which sounds like something Jonathan would do, but Dio is our subject for now. I would probably do an analysis of Dio sometime later in the future, but I'll have the big three do that, being Caleb Aye, X-Forts, and Medi Not the Bad Guy. But we all know Giorno was willing to go incredible lengths in order to utterly crush his enemy in battle, so we can only say the least for Dio, because Dio was willing to crush not only his entire family, but the entire family that took him in and considered him their own. I'm pretty sure Giorno was pretty much willing to kill Bucciarati in order to get where he needed to go to, but if he did, he couldn't join Passione. But one thing that stood out to me was how ruthless he is when it comes to fighting. I'm sure Giorno was willing to use cunning tricks to have his enemies defeat themselves rather than him doing it instead. Giorno doesn't seem to also have any signs of good anger, but that's much like Jotaro in that aspect. But Giorno has a more cool, calm anger rather than an outburst of anger like Jotaro does. We never truly know Giorno's true intentions, and his enemies nor his allies even know his true intentions also. Like with Popo, for example. Popo was pretty aware that Giorno was a strange kid indeed, but Giorno made it clear enough that he was disgusted with Popo, but Popo didn't seem to get it whatsoever. Long story short, Giorno is your classic mafioso, a mafioso with a compassionate heart but a brutal way of fighting, kind of like Kazuma Kiryu, for example. But Giorno isn't a soldier, nor is he a leader. He's more of like an advisor, the person that's closest to the Don in a mafia. We starkly see his character in the series like this. Giorno's cool, calm, calculating, and he uses whatever he managed to conjure up to his advantage to his opponents. But it fits the theme for part 5. Giorno never finds himself in a situation he can never calculate himself out of. Giorno is by far the best thematically correct JoJo there is out there. Giorno is your classic mafioso in Italy that needs to seek the goal of truth and clean up the streets of Italy. This is Velvet Groove, and I'll see you next time.